casinos, gangsters, revenge, and most importantly, Jason Statham. This movie is a guaranteed recipe to whip up a classic action flick. Hi guys, welcome back to Movie Myth. In today's movie, we're going to be looking at another Jason Statham action film, Wild Card. The 2015 remake of Burt Reynolds' 1986 Heat delivers yet another action-packed, violent, melodramatic gangster movie. The movie revolves around a casino with Jason Statham having some bad gambling habits that get him in a bit of trouble, and of course, he has to fight his way out. Jason Statham put a lot of personal effort into this film, more than any other movie he's worked on, having worked on the development of the project himself for over 5 years. Statham also stayed on a strict diet of just spinach and brown rice for the entirety of filming to stay lean for this role. So let's jump straight into the action and look at what this movie has to offer. Set in the Sin City of Las Vegas, Nevada, we are introduced to Nick while drinking by himself in an empty bar when an attractive woman walks in to sit by herself. Nick repeatedly hits on the woman who tells Nick that her name is Dee Dee so he can leave her alone. After a couple of failed attempts, Dee Dee's much older rich boyfriend arrives at the bar and begins asking her to leave for Atlantic City with him, but she seems hesitant to leave her life behind and settle for marrying this old unattractive man. Nick interrupts and insists that Dee Dee dance with him and begins belittling Dee Dee's boyfriend. In order to avoid a fight, they leave the bar and make their way to their car, but the persistent drunken Nick follows them out and continues insulting the boyfriend until he's had enough and decides to stand up to Nick. Nick begins a fight against a much smaller and weaker opponent, but to everyone's surprise, the boyfriend easily beats Nick in the fight with minimal effort. As he continues to beat Nick, Dee Dee's face is filled with infatuation towards her boyfriend, and now fully agrees to travel with him to Atlantic City and do as he wishes. Later on, Nick relaxes at the bar as if nothing's happened, where at the same time at a hospital, a girl's body is suspiciously dumped by a hospital, and she's quickly rushed inside. She is roughed up badly, barely alive, unresponsive, and repeatedly utters out Nick's name as the doctors try to tend to her and figure out who did this. The next day, Nick wakes up in a cheap motel where he lives, but he somehow drives a classic 1969 Ford Torino GT. He cruises his way to work as if he wasn't beaten in a fight just the night before. He works in a tiny office as a security consultant. For some odd reason, he keeps receiving fan mail from random people idolizing him. A young tourist, Cyrus, walks in and asks to hire him for security, claiming he was recommended by a friend from Boston but is unsure of Nick's qualifications. Nick proves to be a pathological liar when he drops off a list of near impossible feats. After getting hired for the night, he tells his friend that he doesn't know a single person in Boston and says that he needs to get his hands on 500 grand before setting off to a diner. When Nick gets to the diner, he's suddenly met and greeted by the boyfriend from before as the two apparent friends now embrace like they've known each other for years. It turns out that they've been in cahoots together so that Dee Dee can agree to travel to Atlantic City with him. Nick will let him beat him up in front of her to look tough and get her to fall in love with him. He gets paid by the boyfriend and sits inside the diner, where he's told by the waitress that he received a call from a friend named Holly. He repeats his need for $500,000 once again and jokingly says that he's only short $499.5. Nick goes to Holly's house and she tries to hide herself at first, but it is revealed that she is the girl who was badly beaten and dumped at the hospital. It appears that both of them had a close relationship, as she tells him of what happened to her but doesn't know who did it. A gang lured her away from a party inside the Golden Nugget Hotel, where she was assaulted by an egotistical man and then badly beaten by his men before being thrown in the emergency room. Nick tells her that he's always avoided the Golden Nugget and even turned down joining the gang there, and as a result, he doesn't have a single contact there. Frustrated, he leaves to ask around anyway, where he meets with his friend Millicent, a housekeeper who tells him to meet him later someplace else to give him his information. Nick meets Millicent later on at a diner, where she reveals to him that the man who assaulted Holly is Danny DeMarco, the son of a notorious gangster from the Italian mafia who has been handed down power and always being handed what he wants. He always walks around with a couple of humongous security guards, so getting to him is near impossible. Millicent tells Nick that she will always owe him big for something he did to her once before, but now she wants him to do something else and stay away from these guys for good and warns him not to mess with them. Hearing the dangers of getting involved with these guys, Nick calls Holly and tells her that he's found nothing about what happened to her. She can tell that he's lying, so she tells Nick what Danny did to her to try and get a reaction out of him, but nothing. Disappointed by Nick, she tells him that she loved him and was always there for him before hanging up the phone. Later on that night, Nick meets Cyrus at his hotel and begins to accompany him around town. As Cyrus gambles on the small tables, Nick cannot help but think about his friend Holly and what she said to him. Finally, he's had enough of wasting his time with Cyrus and goes to Holly's house and tells her everything he knows. Holly pleads for his help in getting revenge as she plans to brutalize Danny and make him pay for what he's done. But Nick storms off and contemplates what to do. Nick decides to pay Danny a little visit. After telling Danny's security that he's a friend of someone called Baby, they let him in to meet Danny. Nick confronts him straight away about what he did as the situation heats up quickly, escalating to the point where Danny draws his gun out and threatens Nick. As Danny's security begins taking Nick away to beat him up, Nick strikes first and violently beats him up before flicking a card at Danny that slices his face and knocks him back. After tying all three up, Nick lets Holly in, who does the same thing to Danny that he did to her. She brings out a pair of garden shears and threatens to castrate him if he doesn't convincingly tell her that he loves her. She drives him to openly weep in front of everyone and decides to just take his money and go. They grab $50K from a table, split the money, and Holly leaves town. The next morning, Nick is supposed to have already left town as well, but he decides to hit the casino before he goes. He sits down with his dealer friend Cassandra and begins gambling on blackjack. She tells him that he did something for her before as well, so she advises him to take his money and leave, but he decides to gamble anyway, saying that one way or another, this is his final night in Vegas. He starts betting like a maniac and starts betting bigger as he wins. But when the casino switches up the dealers on him, he decides to call it a day and goes to the bar. He finds Cyrus again at the bar, and seeing him, he's reminded of the jobs he's forced to work every day. Still feeling lucky, he decides to go back and play some more. He starts winning big as he's closer and closer to 500 grand. Finally, it all comes down to one last play. Win, and he's over 500 grand, and he wins. As he's celebrating with Cyrus at the bar, he tells him that he's always hated Vegas but had no choice but to be there. As he leaves to cash out his winnings, he begins doubting himself and becoming more greedy. He tells Cyrus that what he really needs is FU money, an amount of money so big that he doesn't have to worry about anything else for the rest of his life and not have to come back to Vegas ever again. Still feeling the luck ride on his shoulders, he bets everything that he has on one play with his friend Cassandra, but sadly, he loses. Just when he had that 500 grand that he's been saying he needs, he threw it all away. As he leaves the table, he's applauded by the crowd who feel some pity for him. Nick is frustrated and angry at himself for blowing away the money he had right in his hands, and he drinks himself out at the bar. The next morning, Nick wakes up in Cyrus' room. After speaking to him, Nick tells him to cut the lies and be completely honest with him, and Cyrus reveals his true intentions. He is a weak, scared, boring man who made $70 million by the age of 19 by creating a computer system. He had done nothing exciting his entire life with no adventures whatsoever and wanted Nick to teach him everything that he knows. Cyrus had researched Nick down to every last detail, knowing his history and his entire skill set, even his favorite drink. He offers to finance Nick's dream of going around the world and visiting the Mediterranean as long as he takes him along for the ride and gives him at least one exciting adventure before he dies. Refusing a hand while he's down, Nick storms off and goes back to the bar. All of a sudden, Nick is confronted by two of Danny's men who come to take him away, but Nick, being in no mood for this, smashes his glass against the thug's head before beginning to beat both of them up. They picked the wrong day to start up some trouble. More men begin to appear out of nowhere as it turns into an all-out brawl in the casino, with Nick using any object he can get his hands on as a weapon as he displays his skills when he violently beats up everyone with complete ease. None of them stood a chance. The fight finally ends when the cops arrive and arrest him. Of course, in this corrupt town, the cops take him to the crime lord of the city. Nick is taken to Baby, the mafia boss, but it appears that the two of them actually are friends as they embrace and casually catch up. Baby reveals that Nick frequently gambles at the Golden Nugget and on multiple occasions made and lost the amount of money he needs, showing us that he suffers from a severe gambling habit. Baby informs Nick that he's being accused of murdering both of Danny's guards and he's being put on a mafia-style trial. Danny makes up an entirely different story of what happened, saying that Nick broke in and murdered his guards for no reason and stole his money. Baby doesn't seem to believe him and gives Nick a chance to explain. He starts his defense by saying he doesn't need guns to kill them and tells them what actually happened with Holly and the garden shears, and tells them to check under his pants as there is no way Nick would know that there is a cut there if his story wasn't true. When Baby sides with Nick, Danny becomes infuriated and storms off, telling Nick that he'll be seeing him later. Nick shakes Baby's hands and leaves. Later on, instead of waiting at his motel room for the inevitable, Nick decides to go to the diner and enjoy what remains of his time in Vegas alive. He's met by Cyrus there, who thanks Nick for showing him that everyone is scared in one way or another, not just himself. He asks Nick to admit what he is and that he is scared as well. Nick admits to being addicted to gambling, and that even if he won his $500,000 bet, he would have found another excuse to stay in Vegas and blow his money away because he's scared of leaving what he knows and is used to. As a farewell gift, Cyrus offers to give him a plane ticket and 500 grand, but Nick says that it doesn't matter as he'll be killed at any moment. And right on cue, Danny's men surround him in the diner. For the first time in Cyrus' life, he takes a daring action and creates a distraction by horrifying our ears and singing a bunch of Christmas carols. All eyes in the room shift towards him and Nick uses this moment to disappear. The men follow him outside, but Nick is hiding on the roof lethally armed with a spoon and a butter knife. After envisioning his dream, Nick decides to end this once and for all. He leaps from above and right away begins brutally taking out the men, easily disarming them and using the spoon and butter knife to perfection as the entire team is quickly massacred by him. With only Danny remaining, Nick lets him land a couple of shots before he finally stabs him in the neck and kills him. Before making his getaway, he is met with Cyrus one last time. Nick thanks him for being a good friend to him and accepts the gift that he now earned by giving Cyrus a bit of adventure and not making him feel like a coward anymore. He quickly packs and grabs his belongings before finally driving off and at last leaving the Sin City behind him. This movie delivers on what it is supposed to be and doesn't try to be anything more than what it is, a brutal action fest and some drama to make you relate to Jason Statham as he kicks ass, with a little bit of some casinos and gangster trouble. The slow-mo action sequences also stood out in an amazing way. This movie is highly recommended if you are looking to kill off a couple of hours and enjoy a quick action flick that doesn't require too much brain power after a long day of hard work. You can always count on Jason Statham to deliver a fun movie where he creatively displays his martial arts skills and gets you cheering for him. Well, this brings us to the end of today's video. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel to get more videos like this one. Your support is so important. And tell me what you think about this film. Did you enjoy this Jason Statham flick and where does it rank among his movies? Were you a fan of the wild renegade character who creates his own luck and doesn't use a gun once throughout the entire movie? Let me know in the comments below. I'd read all of them. And if you're watching till now, thank you. I'll see you in another video soon.